Nostalgia is a funny thing. Many of us, in our adult lives, try to reconnect with experiences from our youth that instantly transport us back to a time in our lives when we finished our homework a little early or woke up at the crack of dawn on a Saturday morning to get some gaming time in. There's a few game series that can make me feel like a kid again. Contra is definitely one of them. Still, being nostalgic for something, especially an IP, doesn't mean that a reinvention of that IP or concept will be a good one. I remember Contra Rogue Core all too well, after all. I also remember games like Contra Rebirth, though, which was a good game, a fun game, but a game that maybe relied a bit too much on nostalgia. What I'm looking for, then, is something that plays like a Contra while still feeling modern and fresh. The last game that made me feel that way was Contra 4, a DS title made by indie developers Wayforward. That being the case, I was very excited to see the developer take another crack at the IP with Contra, Operation Galuga. Contra was never a series that cared all that much about story. Sure, there is a story, and there are recurring characters and themes, but that's not what fans of the series show up for. The games do have a very specific feel, though. It's a mix of 80s sci-fi with 80s action, a gritty tale of a couple of commandos taken straight out of any number of Schwarzenegger flicks. The enemies are usually robotic or alien and are often gross in an organic creature feature sort of way. I'm happy to say that this game nails that. Every single screen of this title is undeniably Contra. That shouldn't come as a surprise when you play through the story mode and realize that this isn't really a new title, it's a reimagining of the original 1986 Contra for arcades. That's not to say it doesn't borrow from other games in the series, though. There's more than a little Operation C, Contra 3 The Alien Wars, and even Contra 4 in its DNA. The game does have a story mode, and the story mode has cutscenes and with adequate voice acting that adds a bit of a narrative to help break up all the running and gunning. It reminds me very much of a slightly older title that I reviewed a few years back, Spider Swords. That shouldn't come as a surprise, as that game was also created by WayForward. The story follows Lance Bean and Bill Reiser, the elite Contra Commandos, as they must stop an invasion of the Galuga Islands from the forces of the nefarious Red Falcon. Red Falcon, however, seems to be far from your average paramilitary organization. Because they're working for aliens. Because, of course they are. The soundtrack for this game is largely remixes of tunes from older Contra titles, but they're really good remixes. It's a great video game OST, and the sound effects are also just right, striking a great balance between nostalgia and modern design. The graphics and animation are smooth. It's nothing that I would consider mind-blowing, but hey, they more than get the job done. The core gameplay of this title is pure Contra, with just a few twists. You run and gun as one of the Contra Commandos, with the ability to aim your gun 360 degrees around you as you traverse a variety of levels. You can also hold down the right shoulder button to stop and shoot in place, and, somewhat newer to the series, you can both double jump and dash. It's a simple but effective formula. You also collect several power-ups that appear as floating items that must be shot down throughout the stages. As you might expect, these power-ups change the complexity and power of your shots. Just like in many post-NES Contra titles, players are able to store 2 gun upgrades at a time and switch between them at will. These power-ups should be familiar to anyone that has played a Contra title before, with such mainstays as the Flamethrower and Spread Shot making an appearance. New to the series is the Overload action, a way to use your current equipped weapons to do a super move, such as spread shots that bounce around the screen, or a homing shot becoming drones that follow you for a short time and act like something straight out of Gradius. This has some value, but it's nothing game-changing. During my review of Spider Swords, I referred to that game as Contra 5. Now that I've had an opportunity to play Contra Operation Galuga, I can say that Spider Swords was more of a beta. A lot of ideas from Spider Swords are reintroduced here. The structure of the story mode is very similar, with each level being a mission that can be tackled by itself and revisited whenever you want. This is nice as you don't have to worry about archaic concepts such as running out of continues. Another gameplay concept that made its way over is a health bar. That's right, this Contra game has a health bar, meaning you can take multiple hits before you lose a life. Don't worry though, as Contra purists can just turn this option off if they want to experience the classic feeling of one-hit kills. That's actually a nice thing about this title. It can be as challenging as you want it to be. In addition to story mode, there's arcade mode, which allows you to play through with a set amount of lives and minimal story, just like the Contra some of us enjoyed in our youth. You can adjust the difficulty and number of lives as well. I originally played through story mode with the Hell's Turn on medium and found that that was a good sweet spot. I later played through the game on easy mode with my wife in co-op, which is really the way Contra should be played in my opinion. Couch co-op is great in this game, but sadly one of the biggest negatives is that there's no online co-op. I think in-person co-op is essential for this sort of title, but shipping a game with a $40 price point with no online in 2024 is not a great look. Still, arcade mode lets you play with 4 players, so I can see this being a big hit depending on how often you have friends over. I had to replay several of the stages a few times before I figured out some of the platforming and bosses, and they're still a joy to come back to, especially at higher difficulty levels. The classic Contra guys are here, but there are actually a total of 6 characters. They more or less play the same, although there is some variety on how weapons or mobility actions work. You might lose the dash but gain a slide or hover ability, for example. One of the features that really kept me engaged is the perk shop. You can unlock various perks which can give players an edge in several different ways, such as having you start with a certain weapon or with extra health. You can even unlock character-specific perks. The perks are unlocked with in-game currency, and this currency is granted at a higher rate for higher difficulty playthroughs, which really encourages players to play at the most challenging level possible. Contra didn't invent the running gun genre, but it sure as heck defined it for decades to come. At the end of the day, Contra, Operation Galuga, is a true return to form for the series and easily the best entry in the series since Wayforward's last attempt, Contra 4 on the DS. The game looks, feels, and most importantly, plays the way you want a Contra game to play. It does have its drawbacks though. The main game won't take you too long to get through, and even though the perk shop, unlockables, characters, challenge mode, and difficulty settings provide a ton of replay value, $40 might be a bit too stiff of a price tag unless you're a huge fan of the series or genre. When I reviewed Spider Swords back in 2020, I was quick to say that game was fantastic. The lack of online co-op and length of the game made me glad it was only $20. While this game does have more content than Spider Swords, the extra $20 very much feels like an IP tax. Still, it's hard to complain when the gameplay is such a blast.